Welcome to another episode of Attitudeable podcast. Well, this podcast, is aimed at words, communication, and transformation and evolution of our own profession. Today's guest is someone who is shaping the future of our industry and is the author of a great book that I have just read. Joachim Lepine, or Joe, as most of the world knows him. I don't speak French, so sorry for the mispronunciation of your name.
No
Is a
worries.
translator, educator, and the author of AA Resilient, a brilliant new guide on how freelancers can stay human and valuable today. Welcome to our podcast, Joe.
Thank you so much for having me with you. I'm incredibly honored and excited to talk about this important topic.
Yeah, thanks so much for making the time to be here and talk more about your latest book that is truly transformational, a bestseller already. And tell us more because you are a translator, educator, you have a lot of courses, you speak a lot, you've been at BBC, many different places. How did you find the time to write this book?
Well, it's not very complicated. I was going around and thinking, this was, I guess, in November, December of last year. I was thinking, my programmer friend, Jonathan, was telling me about how programmers in some cases are out of a job or have to completely retool their careers, or new programmers are worried about learning programming because, in the future, maybe bots will be doing most of the programming. And my graphic designer was telling me that there's less work for graphic designers with all the AI stuff coming out. And a number of different people in my circles, including translators as well, but also interpreters, also editors, also other people, were telling me, hey, we're so affected by AI. And I thought, I wonder if there are any good resources out there for this specific situation. So, like a lot of people, I Googled it and I looked around on Amazon and I couldn't find a single darn book on the subject that really addressed the situation of people with a small business who are being impacted, who are worried about AI and the future, and looking at how we can respond proactively. And since I couldn't find anything, I thought, you know what, I'll write the darn book myself. So that's
Amazing.
basically the story of how and why I wrote the book.
Congrats. It's already, I think it was May 2025, right? That it was published.
Yeah, it was just published last month. And
Mhm.
I'm very, much to my surprise, it hit five different, number one in five different categories on Amazon. So it's a multi bestseller, which is wonderful because it brings a lot of wonderful people into my orbit. That's been one thing I really enjoy. And a lot of people write me messages every day about how the book is helping them or it's resonating in some way. And that's incredibly gratifying for me. It's a very straightforward, down on the farm kind of book. I talk about my experiences, the good and the bad, and some
Mhm.
ways forward. So it's incredibly rewarding when it connects with people.
Yes, I imagine. I have it in Kindle. I bought it in Kindle. It's very easy and friendly to read, as you said. And I loved that every chapter begins well with the title of the chapter, and then there's a quote that I think you see yourself there and how it introduces the new content. Yes, I love that.
Oh,
The
I'm
quote.
glad to hear it. Yeah, I think my honest thought on this is that with AI today, especially with tools like Perplexity and AIs that are able to aggregate information from different sources, the only reason why it's really worth writing a book like this today, it's not to provide raw information, which anyone can find. It's really more about telling my story and where I'm coming from, what I've experienced, and how that informs how I look at the world. And when I think of the books that I enjoy, they kind of do the same thing, right? You can go to Google and find information, but what we need, I think, at a deeper level as humans, is we need connection, and we crave a little bit of stories, like real stories from other real people with a pulse, not just
Mhm.
AI. And so that's very much part of that. Starting with a quote is about expanding the dialogue and looking at, We feel so alone in translation and interpreting. So many people think that they're beset with this big problem and like we must be at the forefront of this. But actually there are other economic sectors that are even more impacted, that are more worried than us, that have bigger problems. And so when you start to expand out, you realize this is not a translator problem. This is a new era for all of humanity, very much like the internet that came out, like in the late 1990s. When internet came along, like a lot of people started saying, oh, well, this is something new. This is something different. A lot of people panicked as well. And it did reshape the world, but it didn't usher in the end of the world. And today with AI, we're also seeing something just as big as the emergence of the internet. The LLMs are a really, really big deal. So it's kind of a similar thing where I think it helps to look at the more global picture and to just sort of be curious enough to see, hey, what are some other professions doing about this? How are accountants responding to AI? What are architects doing these days? What are their campaigns look like? So I started doing some research on these things to find inspiration.
Amazing. Yes, you're right, because we saw it. I mean, our profession changed so much from the very beginning. I think when I was finished my studies, not in even internet existed. So imagine I had to go to the library, look up dictionaries, books, and now we said, well, internet, what's that? And everything changed for the better. I
Mhm.
mean, we thought it was going to be like, what now? What's this? And then cat tools as well, many different, transformations that we had to adapt and embrace as well, of course.
Absolutely. And I love that you're making a comparison with libraries and books because it's a funny thing. I put out my Kindle book and I thought that hardly anyone would buy the paperback because you can get the Kindle version for $4.97 and the paperback is at, I think, $20. But much to my surprise, a lot of people buy the physical copy because they like to hold it in their hands, they like to take notes. And so just like libraries have not disappeared and physical books have not disappeared, then I think there's going to be things coexisting in the future. You're going to have AI and you're going to have non-AI services and non-AI products. And there's going to be a reshuffling in the coming years that's going to be very intense.
Yeah.
And I think there's going to be a coexistence of different avenues.
That's good. That's good to know. And as you also talk about, well, in chapter 5, I will read, it's called Leveraging Love and Disaster. And it begins with a quote by Maya Angelou that I loved. People will forget what you said, they will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel. You talk a lot about this throughout your book, about the trust, the confidence, the communication with your client that, as we were talking about at the very beginning, that was so different because it was a very isolated work, and we didn't used to work the way that we do now.
Right.
How do we hold on nowadays with all this AI and what is all going around us? What do you think?
Oh, it's such a big question. My the way that I tend to look at this is that a lot of people are running in the direction of AI everything. Just like when the internet came out, there were a lot of internet everything people, right? Like everything's on eBay now, everything's on websites and all this. And similarly today, there are a lot of people that are looking to AI as sort of like this infallible, amazing new thing that's going to be able to do everything and replace a lot of people, which we should be concerned about. But it has its limitations, right? And one thing that it cannot do very effectively is to build trust. Like, I don't know about you, but if I put a question into ChatGPT, I look at the answer and I think, okay, that might be true and that might not be true. And
Mm.
often when I go back to ChatGPT and I say, oh, well, is that really true? Because I've heard this other thing. And it says, oh, no, I'm sorry, Joe, you're right. And so
Yes, I made a mistake. That was not
I made a
the.
mistake, right? And it's very effusive and it gives you compliments and it's very seductive in a way. But that's also its greatest downfall because if you need something reliable, you need the right information to make an important business decision or choose the right word in the title of your annual report. or something along those lines, right? That's where you're going to look at AI and say, okay, that might be true, but is this reliable? You know, and that's really the Achilles heel in many ways. The difference with a human is that we are able to leverage our human qualities and our professional judgment, which is, I think, a term we need to bring back. You know, we need to bring back professional judgment. It's very, very important. That's something that the machines don't have. And even if they can aggregate information, they don't have the kind of contextual and human decision-making capabilities that a human does. So decision making is really big. And then, of course, emotion itself, like you brought it up with the Maya Angelou quote. I the way that I tend to see it, I am a little bit critical of our profession in one respect, um, but with good love, with tough love, which is I think that we're a little bit behind the other professions, which is normal. We're a young profession as a semi-regulated profession, okay, compared to the other recognized professions with regulatory bodies. We're a young one, but the older ones typically have learned to leverage human relationships to build business relationships. So let me give you a very down to earth example. When I was shopping around for a financial advisor, like many people, I didn't go to the phone book, right? I guess that's not even really a thing anymore, but I didn't go to the yellow pages. I asked my current business coach at the time. I said, "Hey, you know, I want to separate have like a business account separate from my personal account, but I need a financial advisor for this." And he said, "Okay, I recommend this guy." I thought, "Okay, I'll touch base with this guy." And after I called the guy up, he literally said, "Oh, sure, let's talk about this." And we made a time, and he came to my home in a suit and tie and sat down and said, "Hi, you know, I'm Francois. Tell me a little bit about yourself. I'm so happy to be here, and this is such a cool new neighborhood that's popping up." And so we had a conversation before we started talking about business. And in other professions, this is the norm. It's called establishing the relationship. It's like super basic. But in translation, often because we work remotely, because what we do does not require that human interaction, often, we have not necessarily developed that muscle. So for a translator, like in the case, okay, I'll go back to Francois. Because we built a relationship, by the time we talked about business, I was already sold, right? Like he did not have to do a pitch because I was like, this guy cares enough about me to come to my house and ask about my family and to take a real interest in my goals. That's the, I'm sold on this. You know, I don't care what he's offering. I'm going to buy in because this guy cared enough to come meet me. But translators often in the past, it's just been like Hotmail address, right? Like here is the text. You know, thank you for the text. I have processed the text. Here's the translation. And so other professions learned long ago that human relationships are the glue, and even more than the glue, they're like the pillars, they're the foundation for everything else that you do in a successful business. In translation, many of us are not quite there yet because it's not part of our training. But in my opinion, this is our next evolution, is that we need to start meeting with clients. We need to start making them feel appreciated, making them feel heard, and talk to them about their goals and stop talking about our quality translations. You know, let's stop talking about the quality translations. Let's talk about what they're up to and take an interest. The day we start to do that is the day that everything changes because suddenly you're talking on equal footing as two humans and the business starts to flow very, very naturally. So that's sort of that's what I think of when I think about emotions and how we make people feel. It's very important to me. It's about building better businesses, but at the end of the day, often it's also an emotional thing. Like I like connecting with people, even if I'm a shy guy. It feels good to have a relationship-driven business. It just feels better, and it tends to work really well. So that's sort of what I try to teach today.
And it's a very different shift. I mean, we as linguists have to make a big shift in the way we work or we were working, let's say, because we are not accustomed to that. We, most of us, I'm speaking for myself as well, perhaps never done that, you know, I have never done that or never, I don't know, made that turn or that made that step that's so important and make the whole difference. So it's good to like begin thinking like as an entrepreneur or more like a business person, not just the translator or the interpreter, as you said. A big
Absolutely. Yeah, and I do, I don't think that necessarily means that we have to show up in the suit and tie at someone's house. But for us, maybe it can be as simple as, "Hey, you like this document translated? That's fantastic. Why don't we jump on a 5-minute call and you can tell me about your goals and that will help me do a great job, or perhaps that will help me to give you an accurate quote." And then once you do that, then you just maybe for us it's jumping on a 5-minute Zoom call.
Yeah.
But yeah, it changes the relationship. And I love it because today often my clients call me on my phone and we're on a first name basis. So even though most of my clients are professors, so these are like fancy people at research institutes and things, they're often calling me and they're like, "Hey Joe, how's it going? How's the weather in Sherbrooke? How's your dog Tiramisu? I keep seeing her on social media." And so uh, that's transformative, right? And then when it comes time to talk about business or difficult texts with difficult words to translate and expressions and things, it's so much easier because there's no social awkwardness in the mix because it's like we're like two humans working together on a project, which sounds obvious, but it took me a long time to get there, and I had to have business coaches to learn some of the basic skills of doing things like a discovery call, even how to speak on camera. I hired coaches to learn this stuff because it was not natural to me at all.
Yes, I imagine for me as well, being a translator, the written word is our realm. So the
Totally.
picture facing the camera or the person himself, it's like, wow, this is a big deal. Perhaps for another one, it's easier, but it depends on each person, right? So, right. But you can, as you said, hire the professionals, the people who will guide you, and you can learn and develop that skill.
That's exactly right. And I find it's useful. Already what you're doing is huge because you're describing this as a skill. For many
Mhm.
people, for whom this is not natural, they're going to say, "Oh, well, this person is good at being on camera. This person is good at speaking in public." But if we think in terms of like innate talent, it becomes like a barrier to acquiring that skill, and it might seem totally out of reach if you're an introvert, if you're used to working with words, you've been doing it for 20 years, 30 years, right? So
Mhm.
already to see it as a skill that can be developed, just like any other skill, just like we increase our translation skills over time, it's already a very positive mindset shift to start to think about it that way.
Yes, we have to do that. And Joe, and of course, to differentiate ourselves from AI. What's your
Right.
favorite way to use this AI and all the technology that we have as a translator or educator?
I use AI for quite a lot of things. Some of it is translation related. Some of it is related to our online academy. Sometimes it's just for technical stuff. Sometimes I can't find a technical fix because I use a lot of different platforms now. My life has gotten a lot more complicated. And so one thing I'll do, for example, is I'll take a screenshot if something's not working, and I'll go to ChatGPT and say, "Look at my screen. It's not working." And it's incredibly good at saying, "Okay, this is a known issue. It's probably because this and that, and you're logged in on the wrong thing." And then I follow it. I put another screenshot when there's a problem. And in this way, I've actually been able to fix several major IT problems that I was going to hire like an IT firm for, because running an online academy, this is a transactional website. It's quite complex. It gets complex very, very fast. So it's very, very good for fixing technical problems in a way that, we really did not have access to before. That's just one way that I use it. I like using a wonderful little app called Letterly. Letterly is a voice typing app. So when I'm walking my dog, I have my phone with me and I click the record button. And for example, when I have ideas for my next newsletter or something that I want to write or a course I want to create, I simply speak my ideas out loud. I think out loud and it transcribes what I say and it syncs it to my computer. So when I come home, I have it on my computer and there's already a button that will fix the grammar. If there are grammar problems, it'll create natural sentences. And so it'll put things into natural paragraphs and bullet lists, all formatted, and it does a shockingly good job. So those are places where I have significant time gains, and because I'm focusing on a more intuitive way to create, which is to speak rather than to write, like on a keyboard, for example, I'm actually enjoying it more and saving time. So in those kinds of ways, I find that it's quite shocking how the technology has evolved.
Yes, it's amazing. And then you can concentrate on the more creative part of your business or the things that perhaps you need more time and now you have it because you already have the assistant or the help there. And
Right.
as well, in your book, Joe, you also are a strong advocate on niching. How can we have always heard about that. You have to specialize, you cannot be a general translator, but nowadays that is crucial. How can we overcome that fear of being perhaps too specific or too narrowing in our, searching for clients?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So this is something I really work with translators on in individual coaching and in my Squeak to Roar 8-week program. We do this together as a team because it often does take a little bit of working together to do this because it's very case by case. But what I would there are several very important things to mention in terms of niching. So one of them is bridging. So you can have a niche, but also explain that you do more general work as well. There are a number of ways that you can formulate that in your copy. You can also take, this is my personal favorite, is taking two different niches that seem totally unrelated and you combine them. So, for example, I have the example in my book of a translator who is a well-known opera singer and a translator, and he was thinking, he was kind of conflicted, like, should I introduce myself as the translator or the musician? Should I have a separate website for each one? And so, what I always tell people is, and this is a quote I'm taking or adapting from Oprah. She said, "Every year you should try to be a little bit more of yourself." And
Mm.
it's the same branding advice I give. Instead of trying to sweep one thing under the rug, saying, "No, no, I do this," see if you can find a bridge to connect the two. So why not say, I'm the musical translator. Words are my music. I make sure that your communications hit a high note. There are an infinite variety of ways that you can combine what you do, and this will achieve many goals because it will actually play in your favor when you do it right, because it will make you memorable. People will tend to remember you more if you have something unique. I remember one lady in a live training I was doing, she did vodka translation and medical translation. So
Oh,
this is hilarious, right? This is such a fun challenge. How could we bridge the two? Could we maybe make a joke about not mixing pills and booze? There's something there that we can do. We can work with that. There's definitely a way that we can make the two work. But it requires an openness to experimentation and sometimes even openness to a little bit of humor, which clients love. So I very much am a believer in bridging the two. And the other point that I wanted to make is, and this I did not mention in the book, so this is definitely a value add for anyone listening. I didn't have enough space to talk about everything niching related, but you can have more than one, you know. And when you have more than one, the ideal thing you want to do is segmentation. So what segmentation means in marketing is as simple as saying, for example, one day of the week, you do a LinkedIn post for one segment of your audience. On another day of the week, you do a post for another segment of your audience. And when you segment your marketing on social media or other channels, it can also be newsletters and other things, videos, you name it. But when you segment, you are speaking to people so they feel like you're speaking to them. And this
mm,
tends to be more effective than trying to get everyone at the same time, right? If you try to make your message resonate with everyone at once, that's going to be really tricky. Let's think about, pills and booze. If you're want to speak to like the medical researcher who might hire you and the vodka producer in the UK or something, right? That's going to be a really difficult thing to do. But you can speak to one on one day and do a post that will naturally resonate with the other on a different. So if you do those two things, bridging and segmentation, you can make multiple niches work very, very well.
that's great. Yes. I also love the part of the book that you talk about the trail maps and how to develop them. Like, tell the people that you have different ways of working, like you follow processes, as I'm also a big advocate on ISO standards, like the quality
Hmm.
standards, typically, but how the processes and the different stages of the business, like helps the client know how you work, you develop the expertise, and like also the trust, because they will trust you more if they know that you, in a way, know, apart from the words, how to make it work, to have like the final beautiful product that they are looking for. So that's great. I love it. To be authentic, and why we are sometimes reluctant to share or to talk about all the things that we do or with that we can, offer. I like it.
Totally. And you're right. And it's very reassuring for first-time clients. So what happens to us as knowledge workers, and this goes beyond translation, it goes to other fields too, and coaches and entrepreneurs. We develop tacit knowledge over time. So to us, we already know what it's like to work with us. We know that we receive the text, that we're going to acknowledge, that we're going to analyze it and perhaps produce a quote. Then we're going to do terminological research, maybe other things. We produce a glossary. We put our stamp if it's a certified translation. Then if the client comes back to us with questions, we will make sure that everything is kosher and ready to publish. And then there's invoicing. And so because we've done this like a million times, if you've been in the game a long time, you develop
Mm,
all this tacit or implicit knowledge. But if you put yourself in the shoes of a first-time client, they often don't know this, and they're
mm,
often even hesitant to be hiring a human, frankly, in the age of AI, if they can just go to ChatGPT. So it's very, very reassuring for them, compared to just saying, I have received the text, I will send you the translation. It's very reassuring for them to see a simple trail map of, how what it's like to work with you and what's included in the price, what's included when people work with you. For example, my academic clients get free revisions if they have any linguistic issues. So, for example, if one of their peer reviewers says there's too much passive voice in this text, they can come back to me and I'm happy to rework the text to make sure that it perfectly suits their needs. And that
ah,
one little differentiating factor of saying that linguistic revisions are included has ended up, getting me tons and tons and tons of high paid work, because a lot of people who come to a translator don't know whether that's included or not, and most people don't include it in their marketing. It just goes without saying, right? But they don't mention that they offer after sales service. And so the client doesn't know it magically. And so the more we can make those things explicit, the more we can gain that trust. And this is what people have been doing actually in other fields for a long time. It's just that we're catching up a little bit now and starting to feel the crunch, I think, with AI. And so I try to look at what's the opportunity. The threat is that AI is going to take some of the work away. Let's just be honest about that, especially more general stuff. The opportunity is that we are behind on our marketing. If we can get our marketing to where it is in the other professions, then we have a really good chance of locking in that premium work. And because I live this in my own business, I have tons of work. I have more work than I can even handle. I know these things actually function in real life. So that's where I think the opportunity lies.
yes, I really love that because you walk the talk and you are talking by experience, like that it works. And so we have not to like panic, but to go there and embrace all that and offer the premium job, the premium work that we can. And Joe, that's great. I love it. And what advice, just to finish our conversation, would you give someone who feels like, everything is falling apart? I don't know, the AI tools, I cannot continue doing my work as I used to. What can you recommend that person to do or to proceed?
Right. Uh, it's not easy. This is not an easy time to be a translator. So let's name the elephant in the room. This is not
Yeah,
an easy time.
we have
We
to
are,
be authentic. You are.
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, we have to look it straight in the face and say, yes, things are changing. Uh, Even in my own business, I used to receive a lot of what I now call low-hanging fruit. So, you know, a 30-page policy that's going to be very high paying and that's super easy to translate. I'm getting less of that work. And I think that clients are using AI more. This is something that a lot of translators are observing. So in this context, let's be honest, like the more general things, the things that are more formulaic, that are less difficult, AI more and more is handling that, you know. Uh, but on the flip side, I do think that there are still wonderful opportunities in this profession. I know many translators who are thriving, but all of them are people who have at least one, if not two, excellent niches where there is still a demand. And so that's a big part of it. And the other thing is to, without necessarily becoming passionate about marketing or just like making marketing your life, right? You can adopt just a handful of things, like, you know, meeting up with your client the first time they send you an email, posting on LinkedIn, you know, once or twice a week with something that's going to speak to your ideal client, right? This stuff doesn't have to take over your whole life, but if you're willing to put in, like I usually tell people, be ready to do 20 minutes of marketing per day for your business. And if you're willing to do those two things, to find a good niche and to do 20 minutes of marketing today, I think there's great opportunity. And by the way, there's probably more opportunity because, at least anecdotally, there are fewer people entering the profession. You know, enrollments, again, this is anecdotal. I don't have figures, but I know that university programs have shuttered in several countries. We've seen several university programs close here in Canada. I think there was one in the UK a couple of years ago. And mostly what I hear from other professors is that enrollments are not great, right? So as we see the world changing, we're also seeing a situation where there is still a demand in these specialized fields for high quality translation that's publication quality that requires professional judgment. And we also see that the supply is, at least anecdotally, it seems to be a little bit lower. So if you put those two things together, what does it mean? Well, it may very well mean that in the future, the translators who stay in the profession and who niche down and who are willing to do a bit of marketing may be very successful indeed. So it's not necessarily the case that AI will have a negative impact across the board. But I do think that, like in many fields, uh, we do see a growing discrepancy, right? We see people who are doing really well at the top because they're really niche, they're boutique, they've established that trust. And you see some that are doing more poorly than before because the work they were relying on is like there's less of it, or it's not paying as well. So what my goal, and that's really why I wrote my book, and I wrote about this very clearly in the book, like this is not just for translators, this is for everyone who offers a service in the age of AI that AI can potentially do a part of, or can do 80% of, or whatever. Like my goal is to bring you into that top part, right? Let's use this as an opportunity to move into the higher part, like you said, the premium market.
Yeah.
That's I think the opportunity.
Yes, to upscale our business and be there like with AI, but empowered.
Exactly.
Well, Joe, and well, apart from your book, that I will write it down in the notes to buy it online or paper if the people are there in Canada or the US, or is it still sold all over the world?
All over the world, you can get it through any Amazon marketplace.
Ah, perfect. Well, in Argentina, it is also coming. It perhaps takes some more days, but you can purchase it as well.
Okay,
Because,
okay, because you bought the Kindle version,
yes, I have it digitally. Yes, I have it in
right?
Kindle. And what other podcasts, a book, or papers you recommend people to read in order to learn and grow on this part of our business?
Sure, there are so many. These days, I'm reading a lot of books from outside the profession, you know, because that's exactly what I'm trying to do is see, hey, what are people doing in other places that works well? What can we learn to up our game a little bit? There are so many things I could recommend. One book that I really just fell in love with, and I have a paper copy here, is called How to Sell Without Selling by Terry Dean.
Mm,
This guy is
right.
like my hero. I think so. His way of explaining things is just beautiful. And he shows that selling does not have to be a dirty word. Marketing is not about manipulation if you do it right. And
Mm,
so I really like his book because of the mindset shifts. It's like, hey, this is doable. And also we can be effective marketers. We can be effective salespeople, even if we were trained differently as translators or interpreters or editors. So I really like Terry Dean's book, How to Sell Without Selling. Another one I read lately that I really liked is Unlock Your Impact by Sophie Lechner.
Wow, great.
And Sophie and I are enrolled. We're both doing a business program together. It's the Miracy ACES program. So it's been really wonderful to get to know her a bit. And her books are about how to really get clear on your mission. Who are you serving? What is your real value? What are you really delivering? Beyond just the immediate surface and the mechanism, who do you feel called to serve on a deep level? Why do you feel called to serve them? And can you then incorporate that into your messaging so that your clients really connect and realize that for you, this is not just about whatever medium you might be working on. It's just like a doctor, right? They're not passionate about their scalpel. No one cares about the scalpel, right?
You're right.
It's about healing. It's about healing people. It's about helping
Mm.
people get better. And likewise, I like her book because she emphasizes how important it is to be clear about, like, you may be offering this service, fine, but let's talk about what you're really delivering on a deep level and what that's enabling people to do and why that matters, and start to put that into your messaging to really grow your business in a very ethical and upright and inspiring way. So that's Unlock Your Impact by Sophie Lechner that I really loved also.
Will read them. I also love reading like marketing and business books. Even though I may not implement all the tactics and ideas, but I've never heard about these ones. So I will read it in the near future. And Joe, do you have, because I always ask this question, a favorite word or phrase that at this moment, because I know that may change throughout the year or the time of your life, that you live by or that you would like to share with us?
Sure. Well, there's something that's been on my mind a lot lately that I keep writing down. I do a lot of journaling. I have journals all over my house. I'm always journaling some crazy thing. But something
Mhm.
that keeps coming back to me is I find a good question. You know, if you can ask the right question, you'll often get better answers. So I'm interested in the questions. And one question that I find I really like is, what would you love to create in your business? What
Mm.
would you love to create in your business? And I think this capacity to imagine what it could be, the people you'd love to translate for, the people you'd like to be working with, all these things, that imagination is very important. Even Albert Einstein, he said, imagination is more important than information. And I find that very important. We have to flex our imagination muscle and to imagine, hey, what could be. And for me, that's essentially why I wrote my book, right? I thought, hey, what would it be like to write a book? And at first, there was a part of me that was very resistant. It's like, I'm a translator. Who am I to write a book? Who's going to read Joe's book? Um, but I'm glad that I imagined what would it be like to write something, and who knows if it could help other people. And that's the first step. It's like, what would you love to create, and daring to let yourself imagine a little bit. I think that's a very beautiful and inspiring way to grow your business as well.
Congratulations, Joe. Yes, you dare to be different, to face your fears, your why writing. Yes, you are an author and a best-selling author already. And
Thank you.
so a lot for sharing all your information, your creations, and keep it up because this is just the beginning. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Dolores.